Hello and welcome to Digesting the Soul. Today I wanted to share with you my personal experience with a food additive called Carrageenan. In 2014, I was searching the internet, admittedly avoiding some work I needed to complete, and I came upon an article about the seasonal release of Starbucks pumpkin spice latte, and it was written by Vani Hari, who is a food activist and blogger on foodbabe.com, and I will put a link to this specific article. And she actually provided a diagram of the latte and breaking down each specific ingredient. And one of the ingredients really caught my attention, called Carrageenan, because in parentheses she had linked or noted that it was linked to intestinal inflammation and cancer. So of course I immediately started to do a search on Carrageenan, and what I found is what I want to share with you today. So I'll first define exactly what Carrageenan is, and it is a red seaweed that is harvested from the ocean, and it's dried and then it's sent to an industrial manufacturer, and this is where it is ground and it's treated with a hot alkaline solution. And then most of the cellulose or fiber is removed from the seaweed, and then it is processed through a chemical filtration system. And then the Carrageenan solution is then goes through an evaporation process, so that the end result of that liquid substance is sort of a gelatinous breakdown of the seaweed. And the Philippines is the largest producer. It cultivates about 80% of the world's supply, and China is the main exporter to global markets in the US and in Europe. So Carrageenan has been used in American foods. From my research, it looks like from about the 1950s is when it really made entrance, and it has steadily increased through the last few decades. And the reason is that it is used in processed convenience foods, and in particularly a lot of low-fat foods, and these are really in the consumer market where the demand is greatest. And this additive is heavily used in dairy and meat products, and that's because it has an exceptional binding ability to food proteins. And so the food additive Carrageenan is really used to improve the texture of foods, and it also reduces separation of liquids. So it's a gelling, thickening, texturizing, and a stabilizing ingredient. And really good examples would be like low-fat ice cream, because you're using low-fat milk. It helps with the separation, and then in terms of solidifying the ice cream and giving that full-fat texture in your mouth. Another great example is all the non-dairy nut milks that are out today. So your soy milks and almond milks and coconut milks, and because in these items it acts as an emulsifier and as a thickener, and again it reduces the separation and gives it just a thicker flavor when you're drinking it. So in the United States, Carrageenan is an approved food additive in both non-organic and organic. And it was in the 1990s that Carrageenan was approved as a organic food additive by the National Organic Standards Boards. And in fact, this mid-November, Carrageenan is up on the agenda again to see if it should continue to be approved as an organic food additive. So after I understood exactly what Carrageenan was, I wanted to find some scientific research on it and kind of review that data, since Carrageenan does seem to be a controversial topic. And I started to find research that was done in the 1960s, and at that time they were using rodent models, and these rodents were being fed liquid Carrageenan, and then they would be euthanized, and they would during the biopsy found that their intestinal tract showed inflammation and really started to mimic the symptoms of ulcerative colitis. And so this substance, carrageenan, was so successful in consistently producing inflammation that it really became the standard as the methodology when using rodent models to create inflammation in the digestive tract. And by the 1970s, they began to use carrageenan to induce inflammation in monkey models. And the very same early discoverers from this researchers on carrageenan, Marcus and Watt, and again I will reference their research below. By 1981, they had done so much research on carrageenan that they actually submitted a letter to the Lancet journal, and this letter was entitled "Dangers of Carrageenan in Foods and Slimming Recipes." And so what I started to see again and again is that the research showed that food-grade carrageenan was linked to gastrointestinal inflammation in laboratory animals. It would induce ulcerative colitis-like disease symptoms. It would result in intestinal lesions and ulcerations. And it really made me speculate that most likely the pharmaceutical companies out there who are developing new drugs to relieve inflammatory disorders are probably using carrageenan to induce this inflammation in their animals. So the Cornucopia Institute is a great non-for-profit watchdog organization, and they investigate agricultural and food issues. And they have really, for several years, been loudly championing the removal of carrageenan from organic foods. And they really do caution consumers to against the consumption of carrageenan because of the potential gastrointestinal effects, negative effects. And I will provide a link to their website because they have two articles that are really informative. One is the detailed summary of carrageenan and its health impacts for humans, and the other is where they do a timetable and they list the scientific findings on carrageenan between 1969 and today in 2016. So another contemporary research doing work on carrageenan is Dr. Tobacman, and she is a physician scientist at the University of Illinois College of Medicine. And to date, she has published about 18 studies about the biological effects of carrageenans over the last 2 decades. And the majority of her work has been funded by the National Institutes of Health and Veterans Affairs. And her research really suggests that the amount of carrageenan consumed in the human diet is sufficient enough to cause inflammation. And she is quoted as saying, "Carrageenan causes inflammation, which can lead to ulcerations and bleeding." And in 2012, she herself addressed the National Organic Standards Board, and she was urging them to reconsider the use of carrageenan in organic foods. And her research is still ongoing today, and she is currently investigating carrageenan's effects on ulcerative colitis. So after discovering all of this research, it was really apparent to me that as a precautionary measure, I should remove all foods containing carrageenan, given the fact that I have suffered from ulcerative colitis for the last 25 years. And first, let me clearly state that by no means do I believe that carrageenan has caused my ulcerative colitis, but if it may be impacting or playing a role in worsening my symptoms, I really want to get that under control. So in August of 2014, I went cold turkey, identified all the foods I had been consuming with carrageenan and eliminated them. And this was a monumental feat given the fact that I consumed a food with carrageenan in almost every single meal. And for me, the biggest offenders were the flavored coffee creamers, the non-dairy nut milks, protein mixes, and the prepared protein drinks, soft serve frozen yogurt, and low-fat ice cream. I've been consuming all of these items on a daily basis, literally for decades. And in a minute, I will go over a general list of foods that will most likely contain carrageenan, so it can kind of give you a starting point of where to look. So in terms of results, probably somewhere around 6 to 8 weeks from detoxing from carrageenan, a few things became really apparent to me. And first and foremost, I lost 10 pounds. And at first you would logically think, well, okay, you know, Heather, you removed like ice cream and these other things, probably just calorically that was gonna assist you in losing weight. But for each thing that I removed, I had to find a replacement. So when I removed the flavored coffee creamers, I just went to whole milk in my coffee. In terms of the soft served yogurt and low fat ice cream, I just found a ice cream on the market that was just used with heavy cream and whole milk. Instead of consuming protein drinks, I just started eating whole eggs, cheese, and roasted nuts. And so I really did anticipate gaining weight, but 2 years have passed and that same 10 pounds I've been able to keep off. So the second effect I experienced, which became, you know, just within a couple weeks really obvious, is that I experienced much less abdominal bloating and gas, and that was pretty significant because I had just assumed it was either side effects of my UC or the medications that I was taking that was creating this. But to me it became apparent that Carrageenan might have been playing a role. And thirdly, and I very cautiously make this statement, again, realize that this is my personal subjective conclusion, but over the last 2 years, my flare-ups have reduced in frequency and severity. And I will note that I am still taking medications for colitis. I was taking them before I removed Carrageenan, and the very same ones during the past 2 years when I have removed Carrageenan from my diet. So foods with Carrageenan, they're most likely going to be in your prepared coffee creamers, soft serve ice cream and yogurts, even the hard ice creams, including the low fat ice creams and gelatos, canned whipped creams. It's even in heavy creams, in chocolate milks, and even some of the regular milks. They're adding it to kind of give it that full fat whole milk flavor and texture in your mouth. It's often added into buttermilks, as I mentioned, your protein drinks and your protein powder mixes, your prepared yogurt smoothies, your nut milk, so your almond, your soy, your coconut, your cashew. It is often in cream cheeses, sour creams, cottage cheese, ricotta cheeses, and any prepared dips. The other category is baking mixes. It is a common ingredient that can be found in cake mixes and also in your processed snake cakes and cookies. Your pudding mixes and your prepared pudding cups, instant cocoa mixes and your instant coffee latte mixes, and also baby formulas, and you'll find a lot of research where that has been very controversial as well. Another category to look for is condiments and sauces, and in particular salad dressings. It is also in your deli sandwich cold cut meats. It is in also chicken roasters, which was really enlightening for me. I would often make a salad at home and run out and get a chicken roaster thinking that this was very healthy, never knowing that they are injected with chemicals. They are often found in frozen meals, and especially the kind of healthy ones that are deemed diet friendly or low fat friendly. It can be in your frozen pizzas, and this one was surprising. It can be an ingredient in beers, and this is one of the harder ones to identify since the FDA does not regulate beer companies to release their ingredients. You'll find this is information very hard to obtain, but it started to make a lot of sense because there were some low-calorie light beers that I was consuming, and it always caused a lot of gas and GI distress and discomfort, and I have to believe that there's a high likelihood that Carrageenan was an ingredient in those light beers. And then Carrageenan is also found in many, many non-food items because, again, it is acting like an emulsifier, a thickener, and it is probably in about 80% of the toothpaste out there on the market, and is often an ingredient in things like body lotions and hand creams. So what I recommend highly is that do your own research, and I encourage you to review your current diet, kind of assess how many foods you're consuming on a regular basis do contain carrageenan. If you struggle with an inflammatory bowel disorder like I do, consider a trial period where you just eliminate these foods with carrageenan, and then, you know, kind of note and track, are you feeling better? Are you seeing any improvements? And I really do believe that individuals with a chronic health issue need to be their own advocates. And I'm always continuously researching data out there on ulcerative colitis. I'm always looking at the various treatment options, both conventional, complementary, alternative, non-traditional. When you do your own independent research, then you're free from any biases. And I think it's just good advice that we should never solely rely, when it comes to our health, on the opinions and recommendations of the pharmaceutical industry or the food industry, because they often have profitable financial self-interests involved. And the food industry has their own lobbyist, and they spend a lot of money to ensure that carrageenan remains an improved organic food additive. And so when you are doing research, I caution you to verify who funded the research on carrageenan, because many large food companies have the funds to hire for-profit researchers who will support their position that carrageenan is safe for human consumption. And the most recent numbers I could find, 2011, showed that at least global sales of carrageenan were reaching over $650 million. So there are many financial incentives for other countries to keep carrageenan as a foodstuff in American foods. I'm sure that it's a very inexpensive method to act as an emulsifier and help with stabilization in processed prepared foods, and I know there are alternatives out there. They're probably more expensive for companies to switch and have a new ingredient. There are some, because of the pressure from the public, there are, I know, many of the non-dairy nut milks out there that have removed carrageenan, and that's great. So at the end of the day, I really do have to support whole, natural foods, and I do strive to consume as little processed food as possible. And I think removing the food additive carrageenan from my diet has been one piece of the puzzle on my way towards reaching long-term healing, and it definitely has awakened me to start really scrutinizing the ingredients in food and questioning what is that ingredient, and doing the research, and making my own conclusions and decisions about what I want to consume in my body. So I hope you find this helpful, and if anyone out there is willing to remove carrageenan, I'd love to hear about your long-term results. So as always, I'm wishing everybody great health and all the best, and I will see you in my next video.